today's author panel, an intro to self-publishing. We're going to go ahead and get started today. First off, I just want to welcome you all here. My name is Carly. I'm a librarian assistant 3 here at the Malden Library, and we're so excited to have you all. A couple of announcements before we begin. At the end of today's panel, our authors are kind enough to hang out with us for a few. If you want to come up, learn a little bit more about their books. I think each of them have some books to sell as well if you wanted to purchase any of them. So definitely, after the panel is over, feel free to come up and say hello. A couple other things. We do have some writing events coming up in November for National Novel Writing Month. So if you're interested in any of that, feel free to come up to the front desk. We have those event guides available for you, and we'd love to see you at those as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. So I'm going to begin by introducing all of our wonderful authors and letting them tell you a little bit about their books and what they write. So we'll go ahead and start with Kenyon Gagne. He writes science fiction, and I'm going to pass it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming out. It's a great crowd, and thank you, Carly, for organizing this event. It's really cool. I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm not. I'm a better writer than I am a speaker. Okay, I'm Kenyon Gagne. I'm 53 years old. I was born and raised in New Hampshire in the classic New England town, just like you're picturing it in your head. Little white church steeples, covered bridge, the mountains and the rivers. And I lived there till I was 16. Moved down here in 1986. My mother read to us constantly when we were young and really instilled a love of reading in me, my brother, and my sister. So when I was in my teenage years, that love of reading kind of spilled over into me writing, and I wrote a lot of poetry, a lot of dark woe is me stuff. Then when I got a little older, I kind of got busy having a real life. Met my wife when I was 24. She's there in the back row. And writing kind of took a back shelf for a while. But I remember in high school, I was very active writing. We had, at my high school, we had free writing classes with weird names like Algebra 2 and trigonometry. And the teacher would go up and put weird symbols on the board while we wrote. But let's see. So my wife and I have 2 kids together, 2 wonderful kids. When my wife was at Furman studying to be a teacher, she would come home and tell me things that she'd learned that day. And one lesson that really stuck with me was locus of control. Whether you live your life with an internal locus of control or an external locus of control. And that's basically, internal is, you feel in charge of your own destiny. You want to self-publish a book. You're going to make this happen. You're going to work through all the steps to make it happen. External is kind of making excuses for, I don't have enough money to self-publish because I can't, my boss won't give me a raise. My boss hates me, and why should I work hard for $12 an hour? That kind of thing. And that really stuck with me, and it really played into how we raised our kids. And I remember almost every day reminding our kids that they were in charge of their own destiny. They could do whatever they want. Most parents say these things to their kids. And when I was 45, I kind of had a moment where I'm like, I say this to Maddie and Joppy every day about they can do whatever they want with their lives, and yet here I am coming home from a job that it pays the bills. I work with great people, but it means nothing to me. And I decided at that point I was going to put my best foot forward and write a book. I had one idea that had been kind of simmering in my brain for 30 years at that point. And it started in, like I said, I'm from New Hampshire. And I remember in 1986, I was in my sophomore year at Trinity High in Manchester, New Hampshire. And the space program at that point, when I was younger, NASA would, every 6 or 8 months, there'd be a rocket would go into space, be big news. in the early 80s, the space shuttles came along, and the program just seemed to pick up such steam. It's like it got to where it seemed like every 2 weeks there was the shuttle was taking off. And at that point, as a young science fiction fan, I'm thinking, well, this is going to keep on going. And when I'm 50 or whatever, I'll probably be able to buy a ticket to orbit, maybe to the moon. Maybe for my 50th anniversary, we'll celebrate on the moon. But on January 28th, 1986, I was sitting in the cafeteria, and somebody came by and said that the Space Shuttle Challenger had exploded. And just coincidentally, the teacher who was on board that space shuttle was from about 10 miles from where I was sitting, Krista McAuliffe. And after that, there was, understandably so, there was a huge slowdown in the NASA program where they were trying to figure this out. And I was really struck as a young man at the value that was being placed on human life, which is great. I agree with that. But it seemed like it was years before the next shuttle took off. And then, so that was kind of in the back of my mind. And then a few years later, I was still getting newspapers from my hometown because I love it. And there was, unfortunately, in the mid-'90s, at the high school in my hometown, there was a cluster of suicides, 4 or 5 suicides at the same high school over the course of one school year. And these things kind of merged in my mind. I'm like, the huge value being placed on human life on one hand, and then kids throwing their lives away on the other hand. And I just, not joke, I hate to use the word jokingly, but I used to have speculative conversations with this guy at work, and I said, there should be a government program where people who are suicidal can kind of go out with meaning, testing out new, space drives or, taking these risks that most people would not take. So that the idea, I had that idea in the late '90s, but didn't do anything with it until I had that epiphany about the internal locus of control later on. And so I told my wife one day, I'm like, I think I'm gonna write a book. And we were heading out to a cabin trip, and we had the radio going, and she instantly turned the radio down. And it's tell me about this book. And I was so I felt that support instantly and that faith that she believed I could write a good book. And so my book, as described, it takes place 100 years in the future. And at that point in time, there's been a government program called the Meaningful Conclusion Program in place for about 50 years. And like I said, it's a place where people who are suicidal can sign up, and they can they're guaranteed to die within 2 years. They don't know how they're going to be used. The program can do whatever they want with them at that point. It could be spy work, like I said, it could be helping to colonize the moon or Mars. So my story follows 3 characters who have joined the program for very different reasons. You've got Kaywin LaFontaine, who was about my age when I started writing, about 46, and he had tragically lost his wife and only child to an accident. And he was an ex-military man with electrical experience, and he was the kind of person that the program was kind of originally intended to, as the kind of appropriate person to join that program and contribute to society. The other 2 people that we follow are Dublin Dunn, who's just turned 16, and the original restrictions on the program, when the program started, a person had to be 24 years old and had to have had 2 therapists working with them who agreed to sign off on this. And gradually, as big money interests kind of get involved in the program, they realized that all this free labor could be working for them. The age restrictions gradually roll back, 20 years old, 18 years old, and finally it gets to 16 years old, which is a very vulnerable time for kids who don't know yet that things can turn around. So it follows Dublin Dunn from South Carolina, who is obsessed with his own ugliness and he's just convinced he's never ever going to find love, and so he joins the program. And then Prudence Estrada, who's the victim of terrible serial abuse and does not see a way out other than joining the program. And these people meet up in the program, discover that the program is not quite what it seems, and that the program is hiding up an impending Armageddon, and that only they are in a position to reveal it to the world. So at that point, they have to decide whether to lay down and die or stand up and fight.
Thank you, Kenyon. So next up, we have Rebecca Kenny, and she writes spicy fantasy romance. So Rebecca, would you tell us a little bit about your books as well?
Okay, so yeah, I write fantasy romance, and I am primarily self-published, and I love that. I love the control I get over the story, the cover, all of that. But I am also what you'd call a hybrid author. I do have an agent, a literary agent, and we sold a trilogy of mine to Source Books Casablanca, and the first book comes out next year. I don't know if next year. So it's July 2024, and that book is a contemporary fantasy. So it's like modern day, but it's got fantasy elements and because I can never write anything that doesn't have some kind of paranormal or magic thing in it for some reason. So that is a Gatsby retelling. Gatsby with vampires is how I pitched it. And I'm really excited for that to come out. I think they're going to be revealing the covers soon. So if you're interested in that and you don't already follow me on socials, keep an eye out. So I'm really excited about that. It has been a very different process than I'm used to, but it's also been great. I feel like Source Books in general has a finger on the pulse of what people are actually reading. They're very open to, they're more flexible than some traditional publishers, and I've really enjoyed working with them so far. And my agent as well is just, not all agents are like this, but she understands the indie publishing, self-pub side of things. And that agency has been really great with helping me with the sub rights and translation rights and all of that for my books. So even if if you're thinking about self-publishing, there are an increasing number of self-published authors that are getting picked up by traditional publishers, or you have options, I'm getting off on a tangent, but sub-rights and things like that. But yeah, hybrid is combination, self-published and traditional. I write a bunch of, all my books are very different, I think. They're usually set in a fantasy world, and they involve, spicy stuff. And you'll find that I usually put some sort of enemies to lovers thing in there, or enemies-ish to lovers. I love that dynamic of when two people really don't understand each other or like each other. Sometimes it's as far as their nations are at war, and yeah, they're trying to kill each other. And sometimes it's just a matter of, they just don't get each other. And I find that that dynamic is just, it makes for really good banter, for one thing. But it's also, I think it's applicable in the world, just learning to understand each other, opening your mind to a different worldview, seeing others as people instead of just, a general label that you might put on a group. So, so that's what I write. And I have a lot of books out, so yeah.
Definitely be sure to follow her and check those out. All right, so next up, we've got Mike Jones. He writes a combination of both historical nonfiction and children's writing. So I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself as well.
All right. Thank all of you for coming out. This is really cool to see such a big group early on a Saturday morning, so thank you very much for coming out, and thank you, Kenyon and Rebecca, for sharing the table with me. I am of Kenyon's vintage. I started writing, officially writing around 2011. I was at on a vacation, actually. It's sort of like the vacation story there, but with my parents. And just sort of casual mention was made of a railroad accident that my great-great-grandfather, Tandy Jones, was the section master of that portion of the railroad, and I'd never heard of it before. The town where my parents are from is Thaxton, Virginia, or my dad. My mom's from a town not too far from there, but I was kind of shocked that I'd never heard of this wreck before. It was one of the worst railroad accidents still in the history of Virginia. And a lot of people in the town had never heard of it. So I remember sitting there at a table going, I'm going to write a story about that. And so that's what I did. And I researched for about 2 years. 18 people were killed in the wreck, and I wanted to kind of tell their story, like each person, not just the people who died, but just the people who were there that night. The crew and everything that happened there. The train wrecked in the middle of the night, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and everyone was stranded for hours before a rescue came. This was in the late 1800s, so a huge storm had knocked out most of the communication, and the wreck caught on fire, and there was a lot of rescue efforts that had to take place as people were trapped. A big storm washed out a culvert where the tracks crossed, and they didn't know it. It was dark, and the train just went down, and basically, a 20-plus foot hole. And started to research. I researched every person on the train, passengers and crew, tried to find out everything that I could. Went through court records where lawsuits were brought, and wanted to tell their story. On that book, I never really looked at doing traditional publishing, basically because I wanted to put all the biographical information in there, and I'd read a lot of history books, and telling the story is the first half of the book for me. I wanted to take you along on the train that night, but in the back of the book, I wanted a whole section on the biography of each person, and I kind of felt like that probably wouldn't square with a traditional published book, which I understand, but I wanted to put it together my way. So that came out in 2013. We did an updated edition last year because we were able to get a historical marker at the site of the wreck, and I wanted to put a chapter in there. That was kind of an interesting story how that came about. So the natural transition from a train about 1889, or a story about an 1889 train wreck, is a story about a cat who gets recruited by a tree frog to help solve a mystery. But that's kind of who I am. I love to learn, and I love to laugh at the same time. So the second book I wrote came out in 2020. It's called Copper and Tree Frog, and it was inspired by a moment where I was sitting in my living room late at night, and my cat was pawing at the window at a tree frog, and I was like, what if that tree frog was trying to get her to come outside to do something? And I just started writing that story. I was working in IT at the time, and so my lunch breaks, I would just make notes, write just the scenes that came to mind, and put that all together. I've got 2 kids, so we were already reading a lot of children's books, and I could read them scenes that I'd written, and I just love that. So this book was the first one in the series. The second one I hope to have out by Christmas. It's called The Opossum Apocalypse. But it's a series of mysteries that basically the house cat goes out with these animals in the wild to solve. A lot of nature facts are mixed in there, so again, for me, it's learning and laughing at the same time. I actually, when I initially started that, thought about trying to get it traditionally published, mainly because I wanted to see if I could get help marketing it and getting the word out. And then I also wanted to have illustrations in it. I wanted to have kind of some of the classic style illustrations like you see like in Charlotte's Web or Cricket in Times Square, if you've ever read that book. And I thought I'd have a better chance of getting connected with illustrators and things like that if I went the traditional route. So I learned all about that process. If any of you have started or looked into it, there's the query letter process. And I sent about 19. A lot of what I'd read was, you might have to send hundreds sometimes. But the more I looked into it, it was just going to take longer than I wanted it to take to get it out. So I decided, I've done this before on my own. Let me do this on my own. So that's kind of my story. I think for y'all, if you're looking to publish, to take from that is, one, you don't have to stick to one particular genre. You could write a history book about a train wreck and one about a cat that hangs out with a tree frog. And two, there's lots of different paths to getting your work out there, and there are no limitations. That's one of the beautiful things about the time we live in. There's tools for everything, and you can do it on a budget. You don't have to have a huge budget. And even if you're traditionally published, a lot of times they're going to want you to do the marketing yourself anyway. So not that that would be a negative way to go. It's just another way. So hopefully that's of interest to you. Also, one final thing on just my life story. I grew up loving computers, so that's what I did for a profession. In my era of growing up, if you will, we didn't really, it was get a job at a corporation and, you know, go and do that job for 30 years and retire. And being a writer wasn't really something that you didn't think about. It wasn't frowned upon. You never really even thought about it. Like I read books all the time, but I never thought there's a business process to this. Somebody actually does this for a living. And so once I realized I could do that, you know, I love that. And everybody in this room can do that if it's something that you desire. So.
Thank you so much, Mike. Can we have a round of applause for all of our authors to thank them for joining us today? All right, so to begin our question segment, I wanted to start us off with a little bit of a game. This is called the Likewise game. And basically what's going to happen is I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to ask each of you to write a one-word answer on your whiteboard. And once everybody's done writing, I'll say, okay, reveal your answers, and you guys can show the room what your answers are, and I'll give you 1 to 2 minutes to kind of tell us a little bit why you picked that answer. So for our first question, just to get us warmed up, what is your favorite book format? So paperback, hardcover, audiobook, ebook, what is your favorite book format? And while they're writing, real quick, let's get a hand from the audience. Who thinks that audiobooks are the best books? Who likes ebooks best? All right, and who likes, you know, physical, paperback, hardcover? Yep, that's the majority. All right, authors, can we reveal your answers? Oh, we've got a wide mix. All right, so let's start with Mike. So how do you defend hardcovers?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize. I have the handwriting of an 8-year-old, so I can't read that. But
You're 2 years ahead of me.
finally, I love the feel and the classic smell and the feel of a hardcover. It's awkward to read sometimes, so it depends on the size of the book you're reading. Paperback's probably the easiest to read because you don't feel so bad about bending back the cover, but if I just have something that I want to own and hang on to, it's going to be a hardcover.
What about ebooks, Rebecca?
So I almost put paperback, but ebooks are just so easy to have with you all the time, you know, and I have like hundreds on my phone. So even though I do love a good paperback, hardcover, you know, you can't beat it for just being able to access it whenever, honestly. So that's, you know.
I put paperback, and I've done a 180 on this in my life. And when I was young, I would like baby my books, and I would barely open them. I didn't want to crack the spine. If it was a black book, I'd even like take a marker and like go over the scuff marks on it. Now I kind of enjoy when you get done with a paperback. I like it to look weathered, and, you know. And I've read one ebook, and I enjoyed it. But when I was done, I was missing that trophy on my shelf. I was like, where is it?
That's why you get both. You get the ebook and the paper.
True, yeah. But I've got to have
And
it on
the
my shelf
hardcover.
when I'm done.
Just get all of them.
Yeah.
All right, so for the next question, what is one of the biggest challenges of self-publishing, if you can narrow that down to one word? I know that's a hard ask.
Yeah, one word.
Oh, is it one word?
All right, I mean, you can do
Broke the
two.
rules.
I'll let you break the rules. Kenyon's making it bigger. All right, let's reveal our answers. Ooh, yep. All right, so let's start with Rebecca this time, if you want to tell us a little bit about editing.
So, editing is expensive, first of all. And I do most of my own editing. I have an English degree and a minor in creative writing. I have experience editing like before I started writing full time, like for my job. So I can do it myself. Not everybody can. So it gets expensive, you know. Now there are a lot of free tools to help you edit your work on your own. You can teach yourself to do it. It's time consuming. It's not fun. A lot of people like editing because the book's already there and they like to just fix it. I like the writing part. That's the fun part for me. That's like, so when I have to read that thing, and I still love it, right? But when I have to read that thing multiple times and look for all the little nitpicky stuff, and then I'm a perfectionist, so I always have this terror, like, what if I miss something huge, you know? And like, yeah, so it's all on you with that sort of thing. So, I mean, I would personally, you know, I'd recommend hiring an editor if you can. Not everybody can because it's expensive, and editors deserve to be paid what they're worth. They're investing hours and hours in your book. So it's that, you know, you got to find what works for you. But for me, it's just, you know, having to push through and get it done. And beta readers can really help with this too. You know, I love having, beta readers. You swap reads with another author, or like there's a reader who would love to read it early and they don't mind helping you catch some typos. And, you know, so it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but it is. I mean, it is, no matter how you slice it. Even if you hire somebody, you have to go through all the corrections that they suggested and decide what works for your vision. And whenever, like when I get edits back from, like I have an editor now at Sourcebooks. When I got edits back from her, it was a little rough, like that first night. And this happens to me every time I get feedback, even from beta readers. I'm always like, no, everything I have is perfect. You can't touch it. I'm not touching it. And then I sleep on it. And the next day I go back and I look at it and I'm like, you know, they had a point. And I think I can do this. And, you know, so if you are going through that process and you feel that knee-jerk reaction, like just give yourself some time and then like go back to it. And, you know, you don't have to take all the edits. I'm pretty ruthless when I edit my own stuff. And I am with other people's stuff too, which I think has given me a little reputation. I try to be nice too, but, yeah, if you're getting that feedback from somebody, it's always hard, but it can be helpful. Not always. Some people just, you know, they don't get what you're trying to say. But this has been really long, so I'm going to stop now. But yes, editing. All right, I'm done.
All right, Kenyon, what do you want to tell us about tech?
Okay, yeah, I put tech. It's possible that without my wife's help, I could have put out a polished book like this, but more than likely it would have been printed at Staples in a 3-ring binder and sold out of my trunk. I'm not a natural with the technical stuff, so that was the biggest challenge for me. You know, converting this file to a PDF to this, and going back and forth with formatters and everything, and yeah, so that was the biggest challenge for me. The actual writing was, you know, the more natural part for me.
What about you, Mike? What do you want to tell us about building a business?
Well, to follow on what Rebecca said, I didn't put that as my answer, but we have a saying in our house. We'll be reading lots of traditional books, and we'll spot an error, and we'll say, one of us will bring it to the other and go, editing is hard.
Yeah.
Because even in these, you know, very huge publishing houses that have teams of people working on the books, sometimes stuff slips through. And so I do second that. If you can get an editor, they're definitely worth their money. Shout out to Dr. Laura Rhoda, who helped me with mine. I wrote building awareness, so I cheated and put the 2 words because I was going to put marketing. It's not just the act of marketing that's challenging, for me at least. It's taking that marketing and getting results. And so it is sort of marketing, but there's lots of advice and tips and platforms and things that you can do to get the word out about your books. But finding the right one has probably been the most challenging for me. And some of it may be the genre that you write in. I write children's books. Well, kids aren't on social media and things like that, at least the age range that I'm writing at. So it's reaching out to parents and families and figuring out a lot of word of mouth is what works for me. But trying to nail that down, like how do I do this? Also, for me, I'm always trying to figure out how to do it without being, I'm not really a salesperson. I don't want to be like in people's face all the time, like buy my book. Although sometimes I think that's what's necessary. But that's probably the biggest challenge to me is making people aware that your book exists. You may have a great book or a great book that's of interest to a certain group of people, and figuring out how do I make them aware that this is out there. And then from that point, you can sell the book once they're aware of it. Hey, this you might like this for X, Y, Z reasons. And so getting that awareness is probably what I would say is the biggest.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you guys another question. On the flip side, what would you say is the biggest advantage, the biggest positive about self-publishing?
Are you going to limit me to one word again?
I mean, technically, yes, but if you're a rule breaker,
Okay. My teachers would definitely say I was a rule breaker. All right.
All right, are we ready to reveal? So I think this one matches a lot more. So let's go ahead and start with Kenyon, since your answer was a little bit different.
Freedom, yeah. I put all kinds of wacky things in my book that a traditional publisher would have nixed. There's an entire chapter that I'm sure would have been nixed. That's just ridiculous. I forgot to point out my book is a morbid topic, but it's balanced with a lot of humor, just the ability to write the book exactly the way you want it, which is a double-edged sword, because a traditional publisher might have been useful in making it more marketable, but yeah.
What about you, Mike?
I put control. I wanted to put creative control, but you limited me.
My bad.
You limited his creative control.
Oppressed my creativity. But yeah, it's like Kenyon said, it's being able to write the book the way you want, put the things in it that you want, and there's probably going to be readers who want that. Publishers, they may be just looking at it from a commercial standpoint, which is a numbers thing, which I understand to run a business, but there may be a lot of people who want to read it the way you wrote it, or want the elements that you put into the book. And having that control allows you to tell the story the way you want to tell it, and to deliver it to the people who want to read it the way they'd like to see it. In addition to just the storytelling piece of it, you have more control over where you sell it, how it's marketed, what the cover looks like. If you want to revise it, you can, I added a chapter to the Lost at Thaxton book last year. That would have been a lot harder if it was traditionally published. You can make a small modification if you want. There's just so many things that you can do with it. If you want to make a large print version, you can. The publisher's going to decide whether that's something that's worth it or not. If they have the control. So it's more than just the storytelling, it's how the product is produced that you have control over. So I definitely think that's probably the biggest benefit of it.
Did you have anything you want to add, Rebecca?
Yeah, a slight twist on that is I like the control of the timing of things. Traditional publishing is incredibly slow. And there are many reasons for that, but I like to be able to write something and get it out, whenever I want to. Like, if I want to publish a book every 2 months, I can do that. I mean, I might lose my mind, but, I can do that if I want to. And, having control is great, having that creative control and being able to do whatever you want with it. I will say that if you want, you have to know your audience. So there are going to be some restrictions on you, even if you're self-published, as far as you need to know what they really want. You need to know what might turn them off a bit, you need to be sensitive to what people are looking for. You need to understand the tropes and expectations of the genre in which you're writing. So there's always going to be some things you need to be aware of, even, when you're self-publishing and you have a lot of freedom in that respect. But yeah, it is nice to be able to have the timing control, the flexibility, the freedom with the cover design and all of that. Although same thing there, you want to be aware of what is selling in your genre. So yeah, you can't just throw everything out the window and then
Well, thank you guys so much for those answers. So we'll go ahead and put the whiteboards away. You are no longer limited to one-word answers. So I kind of wanted to start by asking you guys, once you have a book, what would you say are kind of the first steps of moving towards the process of self-publishing? You have your manuscript. Where do we go from here? And we'll go ahead and start with Mike on this one.
Excuse me. Well, once a manuscript is ready, I would probably say next is revisions, revising it yourself. I am fortunate, I've got a lot of readers at home, but I usually will first go through, I read it out loud to myself a lot, because I will hear, as I read it, rough patches, or I'll just come across something, or there's a blatant grammar issue here. And then I may have a family member read it back to me after I've already gone through that process. And I can really hear if they stumble across something, it helps me to go, okay, I can see that's rough, because when they're reading it out loud, that's kind of how it's going to be in the reader's mind as well. So if you can do that, that's great. But the revisions process is grindy, but it's necessary to get your manuscript more polished. And that's, for me, I do that before I go to the editor, because I don't want to waste her time with things that I could have caught, myself. And of course that's money too, but really I want to make sure that as far as I'm thinking before I hand it off to her to carve up, that I've got it as good as I can. And so that would be, I guess the first step for me would be the revisions process.
So we'll just kind of keep going kind of sequentially. So after you've got your revisions done, what would you say? Or would you start with something other than revisions? So
let's say that you've done all the edits you can do yourself. It's been through an editor if you're going to use or it's been through beta readers, At that point, you've got a book that you can put up somewhere. So you need to start looking at what platform you're going to use. For me, it's Amazon's Kindle Direct publishing program. I know there are other options. I've just always used them because it's easy and I don't want to learn anything else. I tried Ingram Spark at one point and I was like, they were confusing. But a lot of people swear by that one. So you just need to do some research. There are plenty of blog posts, articles, whatever, people out there who will give you all the info on each of those platforms. And then you need to format it. So formatting can be tricky. I don't do what I do necessarily. I do all my formatting in Word. Hey, it works out. I make chapter header graphics in Canva, and I just pop them in at the beginning of every chapter. Super easy. I use a transparent PNG file. And I use, I set the margins. You want to have, I think I use 11-point font on most of mine. You want to use a nice standard font, Georgia Times New Roman, something like that. Just like a standard. Don't get weird with it, because people like to be comfortable with what they're reading. They like a nice standard font. And, you'll want to set your line spacing. So, go look at one of your books that you have and just kind of compare the formatting in a few different books. You can also hire a formatter, but like me, I do all of the things myself, and I like to do that. So I'll usually just put TV on, and I'll just listen to it, and then I'll just work on it, and I'll make the chapter headers and I'll make the title page, and you can put all of that into Word, or you can pay for a program. I forget the names of them right now, but there's a number of programs that you can use. What is the one? I tried one. Yeah, Atticus. Yeah, there's a few different ones, and they'll make it, if you want to, put in the time to learn how they work, they'll make it a little easier for you after that initial learning curve. But I just, you can just do it in Word, so you don't have to have that extra investment. I'm always like, this is how you can save the money. And then once it's formatted, honestly, well, you need a cover. But yeah, you need a cover. But once you have that and the formatting done, you could just post it. Amazon makes it really easy, honestly. There's always going to be some little kinks in there, but yeah.
So Kenyon, do you have anything to add?
Yes. So as Rebecca said, when you are going to upload your stuff to Amazon KDP, there's only two things that you need. One is your formatted manuscript, and the other is your cover design. And I'm super impressed that you do your own formatting. I would not even begin to be able to tackle that. So I went on Fiverr and found a formatter, and I think for me, what that cost wound up being, I think the base cost was like $125, but I'm a rough client, so it wound up being like $200 or so for the formatting. I had little symbols that are inserted in the text. It's not illustrated per se, but there's little symbols that prompt you to play a song on a Spotify playlist at that time. Like you said, cover design. I think Rebecca does a lot of her own covers too. Another thing I would not begin to know how to be able to do. So I got a cover designer based on a local author who helped us through the process. And they were called eBook Launch, and that was a fun process. And I would, if you're going to skimp on anything during the process of publishing your own book, don't make it the cover, because we're told all our lives not to judge a book by its cover, but we all do. And if my book doesn't become popular, I don't want it to be because of the cover. I would say before the formatting process, like you said, I think Mike was talking about getting your family to read it. I did not hire an editor, but I do have a very picky Yankee family who is always very eager to find my mistakes and point them out. So if you can get adopted by a Yankee family, that's helpful. But yeah, it really, in my finished product, volume 1 at least, having gone back and read it several times, I think I've only found in the 574-page book like one missing quotation mark, on page 420 or whatever. And I will say, I add one thing that's super important. Beta readers, I did not use. Totally wish I had. If I was going to start over, I would use beta readers. I talked about the freedom of self-publishing, and I said it's a double-edged sword. And that's the other edge, is that I think my book, the first one, I think there's a lot of fluff in there that I could have eliminated. A lot of like quirky things that are maybe too quirky that would have come to light, I think, if I'd been brave enough to send it to beta readers. But I was a little cocky, I think. But like, this is great, just as it is. I don't need anybody's opinion. I was wrong. So.
Carly, I had one thing to kick in since we talked about the tools. There is a tool that if you have it in your budget, or if you can crowdfund enough people to give you a couple $100, I think it's $200 or $250. It's called Vellum. Vellum, Vellum. There's two downsides to it. One is the cost. I think it's $200 for one to do your ebook formatting, and then $250 for the one that does both paperback and ebook formatting. But that is for life, so you don't have to like pay a subscription for it, and you get all the updates when they update it. The other downside is it's Mac only, so if you don't have a Mac or access to one, but it is, you put your Word document into it, and it spits out a beautifully formatted book. And you can do that if you're going to write multiple books. It pays for itself easily. It sets everything up the way you would expect a professionally formatted book in the interior to look. So I just wanted to mention that one since we were talking about formatting, because it is a fantastic tool.
Awesome, awesome. I was also going to kind of piggyback on that question and ask if any of you had any advice for finding beta readers. What does that process usually look like if you've used them? Do we want to start with Rebecca, because I know you mentioned?
So when I first got back into writing, like more, because I had little kids, and so I took a break for a while from writing anything that I liked, and I was just writing nonfiction blog posts and buying guides and all this, boring stuff for money. But when I got back into writing stuff for me, I went on Twitter and, got involved in the writing community there. Of course, that's changed a lot now. But I would just say find a community of fellow readers and writers on whatever social platform works best for you. And then just start building some little relationships there. And then, when your book is ready, just put out a call. Just say, and this is how you have to do it to start with. So, it can be a little tricky because you don't want to give your manuscript to just anybody. But at the same time, if you don't really have a lot of connections built, you might have to risk it a little bit that first time. But if you have connections with other authors that you've started to build, just message them and be like, hey, I've got this book, and you're writing something in the same genre or like a similar thing that do you want to swap reads? Like, I'll read yours and I'll look for your character really wouldn't say this at this moment, that feels out of character for them, or she just sat down, why is she sitting down again in the same scene? Or you just used this word in the previous sentence and here it is again, things like that. Or like in this one, I realized I said quietly, and it's going to be in the copy. Like, if you grab one of the free copies of this, I'm like, she said quietly and he said quietly, like all the time in this book. I don't know what I was thinking, but like, a beta reader can help you notice things like that, like words you use a lot. They can help you find little typos, and you do the same for them. So it's just a matter of having somebody else's eyes on it that, they're not familiar with it yet, so they see the flaws. And so I would just say, try to build some relationships. That takes time. We don't have a lot of time. So if you want to just throw a call out there, say, hey, I've got this book. Anybody want to read it? Happy to read something of yours in exchange, or, whatever. Whenever you have something ready, circle back. And I think social media is, or like a reading group or a writer's group is probably the best way to do that. So
the writing community on Twitter is super supportive, and even though I did not take advantage of finding beta readers on Twitter, you see exchanges all the time of people putting their books out there, and 50 people jumping on board and raising their hands. Yeah, I'd love to beta read your book. So
yeah, I did beta readers on both books, and the first book, there were just people in my circle that I knew liked history books. Of course, I let my parents read it. Your parents are going to kind of, it's awesome, which is cool. But friends are history, that were into history books. And then with Copper and the Tree Frog, there were families that we knew that had kids in that same age range. For me, a couple things about that is every piece of feedback you don't have to take personally, or I need to change this. You kind of have to look at each one, and a lot of times especially if you know the beta readers, you can kind of know, okay, maybe they have a slant against this particular thing or that. So you kind of have to balance that and don't feel like, I got to change my whole story on certain feedback. But it's well worth it if you can do it. They'll even catch things like continuity errors, like even if you've gone through revisions, you might not realize that you had this character standing over there and now they're outside by the car. But a person who's reading it for the first time is going to be like, how'd that person get out by the car? And that's something that's nice to catch well before you put it to your editor. So I definitely love the feedback, especially with the children's books, because a lot of times the parents will read it to their kids, and they'll tell me like where the kids laughed or something the kids didn't understand, so I can kind of sharpen that up. So that I definitely think it's worth it, and if you can. It just takes 3 or 4, in my opinion, on the books that I've done at least, to kind of get a good collection of feedback.
All right, well, thank you for that. So another question I had was kind of along the vein of the process. Are there any kind of tips for kind of polishing your book that you had? Any like final touches that might be easy to miss or forget about, or just about the polishing process in general of editing? And we'll go ahead and start with Kenyon on this one.
Well, I had, like I said earlier, had tons of family and friends read it and got feedback from them. I read it myself over and over and over again, and finding obviously grammatical mistakes or, like Rebecca said, using the same word twice in 2 consecutive sentences, but also just the quality of each paragraph as you come to it. And I would challenge myself, if you come to a paragraph that you think is a little weak, I try to like turn it into my favorite paragraph in the book. What can I do to really spruce this up? So a lot of self-editing. That's all I've got.
Mike, did you have any either tips for polishing the book or any final touches you think are easy to forget?
Persistence and patience, because you're going to have read your book 1,000 times by the time you're done with it, and you're just sick of it. Don't feel bad about feeling that way, because I think everybody feels that way, just from things that I've read and people that I've talked to in my own experience. You just keep reading it, and don't be afraid to cut things out. That's one, there might be like a really cool line or a scene, but when you think about it, it doesn't really add to the story or help with the flow of it. I'll cut those things out. I use a product called OneNote, which it's like a giant digital notebook. And I have a tab for cuts from books. And so I'll cut something out, and I might use it later. And it's something I really liked, and I'm like, it just doesn't fit in this particular story. It could just be a paragraph, and I'll cut that because I don't want to lose it. Because you get these flashes of inspiration, and you're like, I don't want to lose this. So I will save that stuff somewhere, but don't be afraid to cut those things out if you think it's going to make it a tighter, better read for the reader.
That's a good compromise, to cut it but save it. So,
I haven't completely killed it. It's there somewhere.
What about you, Rebecca? Do you have anything to add?
So what I usually like to do when I'm starting to revise or whatever, is I like to read it through from front to back as fast as possible. Like, just not skim read, but like speed read. Okay, so it takes, and I usually can't do it in one sitting, but I try to do it over the space of like a couple of days, because what that does is it just helps you get a good view of the story arc, just like an overview. And it helps you pick up on like big stuff like this, and when I'm saying this, I'm not an expert, I don't always see the pacing issues, but doing something like this can kind of help you notice those issues. Like, I need to slow it down here. This is moving too fast. For me, I tend to rush my endings. So people who've read my books usually know that I wrap things up quickly and very tidily, and I'm trying to slow that down with my later ones. But so I like to read as fast as possible, front to back. Then I go back through and I start working at it more slowly, right? And so that's where you start looking for your character consistency. And, are they saying, does this sound like them? Your character well enough, hopefully by that time. Does this sound like something they would say? Is this off? And like we said before, looking for those little logicals. Then you have to go back through again, and you have to look for the punctuation, the spelling. Do I really know what this word means? Or did my brain just throw it in there thinking it was the word I wanted, and it's really not? And So, and it's amazing what your brain will fill in. I also recommend reading it. I read it on different devices. I'll read it on my computer. I'll read it on my phone, which is weird, but for some reason I pick up different stuff when I read it on my phone. And a lot of people will recommend, read it aloud to yourself or listen to it. There are these, apps that, this robot voice will read it to you or whatever. And it's a little annoying, but it does help you catch, like if you're missing a word somewhere and your brain filled it in, well, you can easily catch it like that. And then just real quickly, like as far as the formatting stuff goes, you're going to need your title page. You're going to need your, table of contents, for your chapters or whatever. Don't forget that. Don't forget your, if you want a dedication, maybe you want acknowledgments at the end, maybe you want a playlist in the front. I always do that. Personally, I usually like to have a trigger or content warnings page, just like, the big stuff that might affect someone negatively if they've been through a certain thing in their lives, just so they can be aware and just kind of be mentally prepared for that. So you might want to include that. Don't forget your page numbers. I've done that on books multiple times. I've forgotten to put page numbers, and I get the paperback proof, and I'm like, wait, there are no page numbers in here. I think one of mine, I actually published it with no page numbers. So I had to go back in later and update it. And that's another great thing about self-publishing. You can go back in, you can keep revising like whenever. Like if a reader sends you a screenshot and they're like, and people do this. I love it when people do this. They send me a screenshot. They're like, hey, this is a mistake in the book. And I'm like, I always feel terrible, but I'm thankful because then I can go in and update it and fix it. So, and if you find mistakes in a book, especially a self-published book, try to contact the author first. Don't contact Amazon, because Amazon, they get really, like, they can take a book down for a few errors, So try to get in touch with the author so they can fix it. That's just a little.
I'd like to add one thing to piggyback on that. As my story gets a little bit complicated, so I did find myself as I'm reading my books. If there's an element I'm going to introduce later in the book that I haven't mentioned before, sometimes I'll go back and try to find a way to mention something that's coming later, so it doesn't look like too convenient, down the road. And also, if I'm reading for errors, self-editing, and I find myself glazing over, I'll read out loud like the worst reader in a third grade class, just like really over-enunciate every word and get in that zone. It snaps me back to really paying attention to everything that's coming out of my mouth.
All right, thank you guys for that. So I'm going to ask our authors one more question, and then we'll be opening up for Q&A. So if you want to be kind of thinking about if you have any questions for our authors, we'll be opening that up in just a few minutes. But before we do, I just kind of wanted to ask each of you if you have one more tip, either of like a resource that you found particularly helpful, or if you have any advice for kind of like getting started with marketing. Because I know, like Rebecca, we've talked a little bit about how you use hype teams, so like different things like that. So either piece of advice for marketing or a resource you found very helpful. And we'll go ahead and start with Rebecca on that.
Okay, so resource, Canva. Canva is basically a graphic design tool, program, site, I don't know exactly what you call it. Basically, you can put a bunch of graphics together in there. You can do all kinds of stuff. They'll even print postcards for you. I actually have the Pro subscription that is, I think it's about $100 a year or something like that, and it's totally worth it. Now, if you're designing your book cover in Canva, which I have done before, you do want to be a little bit careful about the images, and we could go into all of that, and some people really don't like to use it because of that, but most of the generic images they have in there are fine to use, like on a cover. Like, for example, I did this one, and it's just got a lot of little images. So, but if you find a photo in there that's really specific, and you might not want to use that as your cover because you don't know about all the rights issues or whatever. But Canva, it lets you put together all kinds of ad graphics. You can put together reels for Instagram, videos for TikTok. They've got all kinds of fonts in there. You can even purchase fonts and upload those and use them in Canva. So it's like my number one go-to thing. Like if I need to do a post really quickly, I just go in and put one together. You can upload your own images. So if you've purchased images, you can upload those, and yeah, it's really handy. And I forgot what the other part of the question was.
So I was going to ask you about the hype teams.
The S. Okay. So some people call them street teams, hype teams, or just, fan groups, reader groups. I have a Facebook group, and everyone in it is wonderful. And so basically I show art there first, like character art that I commission, and other things. Sometimes there are giveaways in there, and I also like to do, like when I'm doing advanced reader copies, I'll put a link in there. So it's like a good place to get stuff first, So if you want to like try to develop a group like that where everybody can just kind of be a little community, and they can post stuff, and you can share things first. So that's really fun. And then if everyone's excited about a book that's coming out, they might want to go and post about it on their own socials or whatever. And the cover reveal for this new book of mine, which is a spicy Christmas Carol retelling, I won't go into that. You can come ask me about it afterwards if you want. But anyway, so the group that I have, the Facebook group, they were so awesome to help me with the cover reveal. And it was great. It was a lot of fun to see everybody's posts. So yeah, there's that. And my primary way of marketing is TikTok, Instagram as well. Honestly, like, it's been weird, but I've had multiple reels like go crazy over on Instagram, which is really cool. But I usually like double my content, like whatever I post on Book Talk, I'll post over on Instagram as a reel as well. And what you want to do for that, you can use a little app called, I forget what it's called. There are little apps that will take the watermark out for you from the TikTok video, so that you can upload to Instagram, because Instagram doesn't always like it if you have the TikTok watermark in there. So that's how you can repurpose your videos if you want to. And it can be super simple. Like I like to use CapCut's another app you want to have on your phone, because they'll have these little meme things that you can do, and you can apply them to your books in different ways. That would also be a whole nother like workshop. So you can feel free to ask me questions about that too. But basically, if you're going to talk about your books on any social media platform, I would just say just have fun with it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. A lot of people feel like, oh, it's going to be this huge, horrible time drain, and I don't know what to do. And like, just keep an eye on what other people are doing. And I don't really mean like, don't copy them necessarily, but just kind of draw inspiration. And you'll find that the videos and posts you put together without too much thought sometimes, just like because you're like, oh, that's fun. And then those do better than the ones where you're like, well, I got to put something together and let me take an hour to try to make something. And those usually don't do as well. I don't know why that is. But so yeah, I really enjoy Instagram. Book Talk is fun. And Twitter, I don't do as much anymore. Twitter is just kind of like, ooh, now. But yeah, so that's what I do.
All right, Kenyon, do you have a resource or a marketing tip to share with us?
I'm way behind Rebecca on the marketing. That was a wealth of information. Yeah, no, that was great. I've been most successful on Twitter. I have an Instagram account that I barely ever visit. Facebook, same. And I think people are, in this day and age, really attracted to the TikTok reels with the motion and it's little bite-sized nuggets that really get traction. But I mean, some of my last advice are things I've mentioned already. Beta readers, don't skimp on the cover. I would say a big one that hasn't been mentioned yet is to support your peers, be part of a community, get excited for other people's books. Retweet. And people will come right back at you and get excited about your work. Some of the success I have had, I've been on a few podcasts and everything, and you support that podcast and retweet every episode, and suddenly they're mentioning you and your book on every other podcast. So it's you can really get involved in a community like that. That if nothing else, if you don't wind up making a living out of it, then you get a good feeling out of it. At least you feel supported. And put yourself out there. events like this, book signings at bookstores. I try to never say no if you get an invitation to, and really I've had more success at events, like this, in-person events, than when people can't see your face and don't know who you are. So.
For sure. All right, Mike, did you have any resource advice or marketing tips that you'd like to share with us?
Well, first of all, no one on the planet wants to see me doing a TikTok dance, so I'll spare the world that one. But yeah, that probably would blow up. It would be so horrifying. It would blow up. But yeah, those tools. It's not just about dancing. I'm just joking about that. But and I do second Canva. We use it for a lot of things, and it's very easy to use if you're not, for me, not strong in the graphic design area. I did use a tool called Upwork to hire my illustrator and cover designer, and I really liked that. Layson Savetnikova did our cover and our illustrations for Copper and the Tree Frog. And I put the job out there. People bid to do the work, and they'll give you samples. I actually did a sample illustration. Basically, I put one job out that said I'd like an illustration, and it has these bizarre things that animals are doing. A cat or an owl carrying a dog out of a house or something like that, so that people who would be interested in that kind of kids illustration could kind of bid for the job and then show me their style on it. And I paid for that because you can put jobs out and people will do an illustration for you just to try to win the job. But I kind of wanted to make sure people got paid even for that. But you can set what it pays, and then people can decide whether they want to bid on it or not. So Upwork is definitely a good place for that. You have a little more, there's a bigger marketplace, I think, for it, and there's some very highly skilled folks there. And you have the protection through Upwork of the person doing the work getting paid and you getting the work that you commission through there. So that's a good tool. Canva, they've just actually added a new feature to the Pro version with some AI. You can actually tell it, like, make me a Facebook post that's railroad themed, that has a black and white vintage feel, and it'll kind of generate something for you. It's a little rough at the moment, but we've been playing with it some, and it generated some things that with very slight modifications, we could use for a post. So that was kind of cool. As far as resources, I've always liked, there's a podcaster named Joanna Penn. She has a podcast called The Creative Penn, Penn. She's been self-publishing for a long time, I think, maybe early 2000s. So she was kind of in it when it was really early as far as the tools that were out there. But she still makes the podcast. She interviews a lot of interesting people. They're doing what we do. So you can kind of either pick up inspiration on just seeing somebody accomplish something that you're striving for, or tools that you can use. There's a company called Reedsy, Reedsy. Their blog is pretty useful. They'll have marketing tips and things like that that you can kind of pick up on. There's a ton of stuff out there, and it's easy to get bogged down. Like, I just got to do all this stuff. And I think the biggest thing is to finish the work that you're working on. And then you can kind of incorporate those things as you go, like how you market it, what style you have on the cover, this sort of thing. But finishing the book is huge, because I know from personal experience it's easy to just be like, well, I've read these 20 blog posts and I need to make sure I do this and I do that and I do this, and that's just going to slow you down. The most important thing is to finish it, and then you can incorporate those things. As far as, I want to piggyback, I made a note, because Kenyon talked about putting yourself out there. I know a lot of people who write, or like in my case, I started in the IT industry, not normally extroverted types. And so it can be hard to come, sit up here or go to the event that we went to, where actually all three of us were at that event, the Southern Author Expo. But when you do that, it opens up other opportunities for you. The fact that I'm sitting here is because we signed up to try to do the Southern Author Expo in February, March, January, I forget what it was, but and being here, you know, we may meet somebody who opens up an opportunity for us to do something. That's happened many times. I've done festivals or fairs, and I've met people, and they're like, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to speak to my group?" And then that opens doors for you. So that's hard to kind of put yourself out there, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. And then as far as marketing, there's one tool. If you are on the Amazon platform, they change the name all the time, but I think it's called Amazon Marketing Services at the moment. I'm not 100% sure, but you can run ads on there. I would warn you to watch the budget because they'll eat up your budget quickly. But you can target certain books if there are books in your genre that you think people who read this book might like your book. And you can kind of play with that, but keep the budget low and watch it. And then see if you're getting sales from that. And you can play with that with small amounts. And you might find, no, this particular ad works. And then you can run more ads like that. But you want to make sure you're getting sales from it. They have reports that'll show you got this sale from this ad. That's one possible marketing avenue if outside of the social elements that you can give a try. But I definitely would warn you to watch the budget on that because they will eat your money. So
That's fair. I feel like a lot of marketing, it's a balance of budget and returns. So we're going to go ahead and open up our audience questions portion of the event. So if you have a question, I'm going to come stand over here if you want to kind of come line up, and I'll have the microphone for you. Yeah, if you had a question.
Hi. My question is, do you have to copyright your stories? And when you were talking about beta readers, how do you know someone's not going to rip off your stories?
Can I?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay. So I never used to copyright this stuff because technically, you're your work is copyrighted once it's done, etc. But with Amazon, you really do want to get that copyright because what's happening is that people will pirate your book. It's just going to happen. There's no use trying to track it down on all these sites and get it taken down. There's no point. It's just like, one will pop up somewhere else. But what you want to do is, if you're going to be in the Kindle Unlimited program, which is where you give them an exclusive right to the ebook, basically people pay their Kindle Unlimited subscription monthly, and they can read as much as they want from books in the program. I love Kindle Unlimited. All my books are in it. But if you're going to be in there, Amazon requires that you don't publish the ebook anywhere else. So if they see one of these pirated copies pop up on another site, they'll come to you and they'll say, "You're in breach of your agreement. We're going to take your book down, maybe even block your account completely." So that's where you need your copyright so that you can show them, "Here, I have the copyright. It's my book. These people are the pirates." And I know people give Amazon a hard time, and I understand why. But they are usually fairly reasonable. It might take them a little time, but if you explain, if you have the document there, it's not a problem. Your book will get put back up if they happen to take you down. And so for me, I've seen other authors pull out of Kindle Unlimited for those kinds of reasons, also because they have so much control over the rate that you're paid per page when you're in the program, and it goes up and down, and that can be extremely frustrating. But yeah, to cover yourself, protect yourself, in that case, you do want to pay for the copyright. And that's just one of the things you're going to have to budget in. I think it's like, it can be either $40 or $60, depending on how you're doing it. There's two different ways to do it. There's like one work by one author. I think that's the $40 one. And then there's another one that's like $60, and it's basically the same thing. One thing you do want to be careful of, if you have anything wrong in your copyright submission and they reject it, they will not let you resubmit it, and you've lost your money. So what you want to have is a very plain text file. Like, I'd made this mistake. I left the chapter header images in, and because I had those images in there, the book was rejected because they were confused by this, apparently. So I had to resubmit without the chapter. So make sure you have no images in the book whatsoever. It's just the plain text, no bonus chapters from another, no bonus content at all. That's another thing that threw them off. I've lost money to the copy register office or whatever. I've lost a bunch of money to them. So no bonus chapters, no sneak peek of the next book, just the plain text. So that's what you want to submit to them, and then hopefully everything will go fine. And then you'll have that extra protection for your book.
Yeah, I recommend it if there's a cost to it, and if you do it, they are typically very slow. So yes. don't get nervous if it's taken several months for you to hear anything back, and then out of the blue, all of a sudden, you'll get a notification that it's been approved, and they want you to send a copy of the book, I think, after you've registered it. Typically,
when you register online, it's fairly easy. You just upload the Word file, and for me, the turnaround has probably been more like a month or two, and sometimes they don't even tell you that they accepted it. You just get the letter with the copy, with the paper in there. So yeah, it's like, I don't know. And their website's hard to use. I don't like it. It's old and it's like clunky. It's not great, but you got to do it.
Well, thank you guys for that. Did you have...
Hi, I'm Dr. Ira Williams, and I want to give you a comment on encouraging you. This summer, I celebrated my 90th birthday. And in the last 20 years, I've published 6 books, 5 on healthcare and 1 Christian book. In fact, I self-published 2 books this year for the first time. And if you're ever in the D.C. area, don't hesitate to go to the Library of Congress and become a member, and they might accept a copy of your book. And if you write on healthcare, there's a medical Library of Congress in Bethesda out near Walter Reed and NIH, and I'm a member there. And my books are in my high school. I graduated from the University of Tennessee Dental School in Memphis. Their medical library has my books. And one last thing, my 3rd book, 10 years ago, I used 99 designs, and someone in Italy created my cover for my 3rd book.
Thank you for that. So does anyone else have a question over here for our authors? Yes, if you wanted to go ahead and line up, we'll get you over here first, and then... What was that?
Are you rich?
Are you rich from writing your books?
No. One word answer, no.
What do we expect for financial income from publishing a book?
So what can you expect financially from publishing a book?
Well, I hope to someday break even on my investment. I would definitely keep your day jobs until you start seeing some real sales. There's. I know with my books, I make when I sell a copy online, I make $1.87. So you got to really move a lot of books to move the needle in your bank account.
Did you guys have anything to add before we go to the next question?
So I started out making very little, okay? But I would say stick with it, and if you're in a popular genre like mine, fantasy romance, eventually, you can get there. Like, I worked my way out of the other writing that I was, I had another job, and then I switched to freelance writing at home, and I was able to eventually quit that and write full time. And honestly, it's been really cool. So when this book came out, my Nutcracker retelling, that kind of took off a little bit on Book Talk, and that was a big turning point for me. Before that, I had another. I feel like there's little leaps, you know? So the first one was my vampire trilogy. It's like vampires and humans working together during a zombie apocalypse. Okay, so the vampires protect the humans from the zombies because the zombies don't care about the vampires are already undead or whatever. Is this whole thing. So that book did well. This book did way better. And then from there, it has just been like an upward thing. And I'm very happy with the amount I'm making right now. Although, you know, you can always do more, and you're always going to see people, like I look at some authors and I'm like, ooh, I want to get there, you know? So you're always going to see people who are at a different point. And, you know, you don't have to try and do what they're doing, you know, but maybe you could take a few tips, you know, maybe you could kind of observe their marketing strategy, or like, you know, and just kind of work from there and grow your thing. One thing I've found that is an excellent investment is character art. So people love that, and it has to be the right character art. Like, it has to be from a really good artist, and that costs so much money. They're totally worth it. So hire an artist to make art of your characters, the ones you think might be the most popular characters, so not just any random character, and then invest in that. You can use it everywhere. Buy the commercial rights. That's an extra fee. Buy those commercial rights. That way you can make bookmarks. You can use it on all your platforms, your social media platforms. Yeah. So that is a huge thing, because when people see a character and they're like, that is cool, and I like that. And I mean, I do this myself. I see character, I'm like, oh, I love that. I want the book. You know, that's how people will react to it, hopefully. That's the plan. I got off on a tangent. ADHD, I don't know.
It was a good tangent, though.
Just to chip in on that, too, it's like cupcakes. If you're really good at making cupcakes, you might like making them for your neighbors or your friends, not expecting to make it a business. And you may have a book that you want to write that kind of falls in that category. Like, I'm not expecting this to be, like when I wrote Lost at Thaxton, I wasn't expecting it to be, you know, how I was going to make my, you know, my career money. I just wanted to tell the story. And, but if you decide you want to make it a business, there are cupcake businesses and they do well. You have to kind of treat the books almost like widgets. So there's the business side of it, and there's the creative side of it. And if it's something that you want to do for a career, especially if you're self-publishing, you got to dive into the business pieces of it as well. So like for us, we sell on Amazon and the typical platforms. We sell direct off our website, which is our preferred way to do it, because then we get a relationship with our customers. We can go back to them and say, hey, here's the second book is coming out. And we know these are folks that like what we're doing. We can make wholesale agreements with gift shops and places like that. That's worked well for us. I can walk in and go, hey, if you guys will, you know, put this on your shelf and buy 10 copies of it, you know, we can do it at this discount. So you can sell it retail and make money. And so it gives you a lot of flexibility there. So if you approach it as a business, you can definitely make it work. But that part some people don't enjoy. Like, they just want to write and do the creative piece. And that's where the traditional publishing model really helps, because they're still going to want you to market, I think, but all the business stuff or getting it in the bookstore, things like that, they will handle. But you can definitely make it a career, just like a cupcake business. An individual cupcake you don't make a ton of money on, or one book sale you don't make a ton of money on, like Kenyon was saying. But if you build it out and scale it, you can have a good business.
As Rebecca said, she writes for a very popular genre, and I think there are especially voracious readers in that genre. And I think she's been very active and very prolific. You have a lot of books that, I mean, you have
Backlist helps.
Right, and you have a lot of people waiting for the next book every time. And you've been very active marketing, which it's very hard to stay on top of marketing. It can be unrewarding, but if you don't do any marketing, you're not going to sell any books. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have time for one last question. So if you want to.
Hi, and I just want to thank you. Really inspiring, and I really think what you guys are doing is terrific. I have one question. I am wrangling with a manuscript that needs formatting. And when I went on Google and I typed in formatting, I got 18,000 rather dubious hits. I'm wondering if you could give me an idea of how to find a legitimate formatter.
I went on the website Fiverr, which is, it's called Fiverr, Fiverr, and it's professionals in all types of fields, not even just literary. But if you go on there, I searched for book formatting, and again, it brings up hundreds of formatters from around the world, and I found one that seemed to have really good reviews and good rates, and yeah, that was the starting point for me.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier, Upwork is a similar Upwork, UPWORK. Same thing. They have book formatters on there. They have illustrators, just about anything you can think of, and you can see samples of their work. And you can put a job out there, like you could even put like a chapter of your book, for example, or a couple pages, and say, "Show me how you would format this." And people will give you examples of how they would do it on your particular book. So that's a nice thing.
Is that the Mac format that you mentioned?
No, that's a tool called Vellum, which Vellum will just straight up spit out a beautifully formatted book. So again, it is worth it if you can raise the funds for it, and it'll pay for itself because especially if you're doing more than one book. Because they're not charging you annually for it, that one-time fee is not too far off what you would pay a formatter anyway. And now it's very flexible. There are certain things that you might want to do that maybe you couldn't do, but for the most part, like this book was formatted by Vellum, so actually both were. The first book, it's a re-release. At that time, there was a company called CreateSpace. I don't know if you remember them, but they were the precursor to Amazon KDP. Amazon bought them, and they had packages where they would do the formatting and the editing and everything. But when we redid this book, I formatted it with Vellum. And this book has illustrations in it. It's got little asides and sidebars, basically, and you can do all that in Vellum. So that is definitely a handy tool.
Do you have anything to add?
I just want to say that I feel like when you're self-publishing, there's always this trade-off of time versus money. If you want it done faster and really well and you have the money, you can make that happen. If you don't have the money, it's going to require an investment of your time. And you'll just have to learn the process. So, it's a fairly accessible thing in some sense in that, we're all busy, but you can maybe find the time if you don't have the money. Yeah, and it's going to be hard, it's going to be rough either way, but if you want it badly enough, then you can make it happen and you can do well. Like you really can if you just keep your eye on the market and you just go for it. And you don't have to look at it as this huge mountain, you just take the little step first. You just finish your book first. That's all you have to do. And then you just have to edit it. That's all you have to do. Just break it into little steps for yourself, and don't try to think about the whole thing and how, because it is going to be complicated, but you just have to do one thing at a time,
Thank you guys so much. Let's get a round of applause for our authors. I just want to say thank you all so much for coming and being with us today. This concludes our author panel for you guys. Just another reminder, if you are interested in any of those writing events next month for National Novel Writing Month, you can find our event guides at the front desk, or if you want, you can also find it online on our website, greenvillelibrary.org. Also, I know a lot of you registered with email, so I'll go ahead and try to put together an email with a lot of those resources that you guys were talking about today. So that way you can kind of have another copy of those if you weren't able to write those down. And with that, our authors will be up here for a few more minutes. If you guys want to come up, ask them about their books. I think a lot of them have their books with them that they'll sign or sell if you wanted to buy a copy. So definitely feel free to come up and meet with them. And that's all that we have for you today. Thank you again for coming. Have a great afternoon.